Hey, Microcourse family, and welcome back to the second part of your Create Your Future by Mindset Shifting. And in this one, I want to talk about a concept that is important when you're setting yourself up to deal with other people from a point of a business owner. And not necessarily a business owner. This applies rather in life generally. It's a good principle to get your head around. Now, generally speaking, I would recommend anybody to go and purchase a copy of a book called the. It's by the Three Initiates, and it's the Hermetic Principles. I'm going to drop a set of notes later, but it's the if you just search for the Three Initiates, and it's the ancient seven principles of the Hermetics, and it's a very intriguing read, and it's not religious in any way, shape, or form, but it really does strengthen some core physical principles of the universe that we can apply to our lives and to make some of what happens to us a bit more commonsensical. So I would recommend that you pick that up. You can pick it up on as a Kindle version on Amazon for I think less than $5. So it's really cheap. If you search on YouTube, then you'll get there's various people on there that run down all the seven principles through video, and I think there's even an audio book on there as well. So you don't have to spend if you don't want to, but I mean, $5 shouldn't really be killing anybody. But in this one, I want to. That was a bit of background, but in this one, I want to talk about perspective. So this is so important, really, and it drives a lot of what happens in our minds as well. So I'm going to start it a very simple kind of way to think is that we apply it to us living on planet Earth and what we know generally by walking around, because we can make a comment like, oh, it's hot today, or it's cold, or when we walk into a cold room or something, we physically feel that it's colder than our surrounding environment. But I want you to think about what really is cold, and this is how we're going to look at perspectives to show that things are not always necessarily as they seem, and that is a perspective. And in a lot of situations, we gain. In the previous lesson, I talked about that kind of mental junk, and we collate a lot of that in our life experiences, and we tend to get a little bit distorted, and we start to have beliefs about certain things through how we've lived our life and the experiences that we've had, and it kind of distorts our perspective. Have you ever heard of someone say, oh, well, that person is narrow-minded, or that person doesn't have the ability to see in a broader situation? Well, it's all perspective, and the way I'm going to highlight this is what's cold to one person may not necessarily be the case at all. So, I mean, if we look at, let's say, minus 32, for most of us, that's going to be cold, right? Or even like minus 5. That's cold, because it's below freezing, which generally is the the sort of point where water freezes in our scientific world anyway. And equally, if you're wandering around and it's 70 degrees, we might consider walking around that day is very hot. But does that define what hot or cold is? I'm going to go this way on the chart because I think it'll have more impact on what I'm trying to convey. Now, 100 degrees, is a boiling point, so that could equally be considered, extreme hot, boil. I mean, the human body generally, well, not generally, it can't sustain that type of heat. You're gonna start to, receive burns on the skin, and the higher the temperature goes, the more severity, and ultimately, if it's severe enough, your life is at risk. But in terms of perspective of things, how do we define whether that's hot? Because if we suddenly went, not that we can, but imagine this, from a theoretical perspective, if we suddenly went here to the sun, which is like 9,000 degrees, which is hot. Yeah, it's very hot. Suddenly 100 degrees is cold, right? And nothing's really changed in those few seconds that I've explained it, because before I went to 9,000 degrees, we generally accepted that 100 degrees was hot. But now it's cold. In actual fact, it's very, very cold compared to 9,000 degrees. Extremely cold. It's the same as going from 0 to like minus 9,000 over here, or 8,900 if you don't want to correct my maths. But it's so extreme, we can't even imagine as humans like what that's like, and we certainly couldn't bear it. And if you continued that scale, you can just go on, infinitely. Scales are, just immeasurable. You could go on to, trillions and, never-ending equations as to this hot and how it would go. We can't think of it in our brains because we're limited to what we know scientifically. But hopefully what you're going to see is that whenever you're looking at a situation, you're looking at it in the lens of what you see right now. And you need to be able to shift that. Okay, it's called shifting perspectives. And this is where mindset control comes in. And you need to look at every situation, because it might be just a case of you're viewing this micro course and you say, well, I can't do that. No, that's just a perspective, right? It's a limiting belief that you hold. And it's going to have certain emotions attached to it, like, fear, anxiety. But this doesn't mean, it's just a perspective. And it's your perspective, like this, in that narrow-minded world. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, everyone is human, everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. So how is it that Elon Musk is one of the most richest men in the world? Jeff Bezos is one of the richest men in the world. They're the same as me and you. They're born to this world without any knowledge, without any skills. And they only have access to 24 hours in a day. So what makes them different? Well, it's this versus this. It's not as simple as that, but from a very sort of simplistic level, this mindset perspective shifting is an important part of it, because I challenge you in anything that you do in the next 24, 48, 72 hours, like 1 to 3 days, to apply what you've just seen in this video to any situation where you're doubting what can be done. And some of the things that are going to be in your mind as you work towards starting your own QS consultancy are like, I'm not going to be able to get clients. Okay, so that's 0 to 100 degrees, right? You haven't pushed your mind to find the sun at 9,000 degrees yet, right? Because your mind is conditioned that you're going to fail. Well, you are what you put out. You become what you put out. So if you want to put out, I'm not going to get clients, there's going to be no magic formula. You will not get clients. Very, very simple. If you put out, I can't, you're going to get back, I can't. Simple, guaranteed. This is why you need to look at this perspective game and challenge yourself as to why you're having that belief in yourself that you cannot push. And this is really what separates the successful people. They will not accept the perspective that they have. They will push, they will be curious, they will experiment, they will do all manner of things to test, experiment day in and day out until they find that magic potion, until they can push towards the 9,000 degrees. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, so don't expect it to. But start small and aim big, because I guarantee you that when you start to master this perspective issue, you will start to see things in a very, very different momentum. Now, in the next one, I'm going to talk about some like exercises that you can do according to the fears that you are experiencing, because these drive the perspectives to some extent. And I also want to show you more about internal communications with ourselves and why it's important not to be negative, and not like this example that I've used, you know, on the screen here, that you can't achieve what others quite clearly have. Okay, so it's very, very important that you understand the limiting yourself of your perspective is only going to limit yourself, period. Okay, now there are books and videos that you can go and look at this more. I suggest you do. I cover this in a lot more detail. We go into hours and hours of this type of training in the full program, because it's so important that you bend your mind into a newer, better shape so that you can move forward more progressively and not have the fears attached to you breaking out into this new venture. So practice with the perspectives. Look at that example that I've given you. Consider it within the next, as I say, 1 to 3 days. Just take examples of you coming across daily activities where you've done that narrow-minded approach and drawn a conclusion. I challenge you to test it, to test your perspective as to what else is available. You know, lots of people are in that trap. So don't, like, you're not wrong, right, by doing that. I'm not saying you're wrong, you're a bad person, or any of that nonsense, right? All I'm suggesting is just you need to start working out, your hands need to go like this, and your perspective needs to become broader. It needs to move towards that 9,000 degree sun. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up, and it's hopefully been a bit of an eye-opener for you to challenge yourself going ahead. Use that coupled with the first training about be in it to win. You have to be in it to win. And you don't want to be a ghost, you want to be that entrepreneur. And now we're going to look more closely about those emotions that come to us when we start to get outside of a comfort zone, and what you can do to challenge those in your own life, and how you can journal them and document them for any situation that you're presented with where you don't know how to move forward, how you can actually use those negatives essentially and flip them around. And this is why I've suggested in the earlier part of this video for you to go and get a copy of the book by the 3 Initiates, because this is all part of the 7 principles that everything in the universe is balanced, and when you do one part, there will be a corresponding part to that. Now, if you think all of that is nonsense, okay, respect your opinion, but I highly suggest that you take some of this information and explore further and do the exercises, do the practice like I've suggested, and see if it doesn't challenge you mentally to how you have been looking at things and whether it has made any difference whatsoever. I suggest if you really do apply this, it will make changes. So see you in the next one, and thanks for watching. Really appreciate your time and patience. See you.